my colleague Christine Rosen
This was a wonderful piece.
is she smart? A lot of people are saying Christine Rosen, one of the smartest people writing in commentary. And I wrote a whole book about this, so I was definitely feeling what she was feeling. And she used the occasion of the launch of Tucker Carlson's Twitter show, including his discussion of sweaty, rat-faced, anti-Christian Jewish leaders, to talk about something that we talk about here a lot, which is cable news. The window, the aperture is closing around cable news.
The title of the piece is "The End of Cable News?" ? But there really doesn't need to be a question mark. The industry is in inexorable decline, and she writes in her piece in Commentary Magazine, which we will link, about the decentralization that started back in 2004. The unsettled media landscape is part of a much larger 40-year story about the collapse of gatekeepers, with new media such as cable news, the internet, and now social platforms each playing a part in upending both the old order and each iteration of the new order that preceded it. Much of this was a welcome democratization of an industry that had grown insular, sanctimonious, and unaccountable in its behavior. Yes, we just gave a couple of examples. CNN. When a Powerline commenter successfully exposed the fact that CBS News icon Dan Rather had aired a story on 60 Minutes just before the 2004 election that lied about President George W. Bush's service in the Texas National Guard based on falsified documents that Rather had failed to verify, it heralded a new world of citizen-sponsored fact-checking of institutions. It also spelled the end of Rather, who, along with his producer, was fired from CBS News.
I agree wholeheartedly with Christine, who's such a good writer. But I do think there is another. The next thing is this. And I've been thinking about this a lot as it relates to artificial intelligence, as it relates to the loss of the blue checks and accountability and all of those things. The value of straight news is only increasing. In a chaotic space where opinion has supplanted substantially, emotional-driven blabber has substantially supplanted real reporting and reliable news, we are now in a place where, as people become less confident in sources, reliable, good reporting and reliable news becomes more valuable.
One of the things that I think when you say that is that people don't agree on what straight news is.
Right.
When I think about, like, what are the sources I go to, I could cite a handful of sources that I think of as straight news, but I think that there would be a lot of controversy about that.
So,
and I think that's because, and I think other people, they would say, well, I read Politico Playbook and I read Axios AM, and I would say, like, are you kidding me? Those things are not straight news.
So there is. This is one of the reasons I'm always picking on the Associated Press here. When the Associated Press does goofy kind of trend reporting and stuff instead of just doing the commodity news that we want the Associated Press to do. So that's part of it. But I would say, so let's take the two best newspapers in the United States, the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. Does the New York Times have a point of view? Obviously, it has a point of view. Do I generally trust the facts that are reported in the New York Times? Yeah. If the New York Times has reported it, I feel a pretty high degree of confidence that the number is accurate, the names are spelled right, that the accounting of the things is correct. I feel the same way about the Wall Street Journal. Now, if you're a left person, you don't like the way the Wall Street Journal covers things a lot of the times. If you're a right person, you don't like the way the New York Times covers the things, the stories they choose and all of that stuff. But the payload, the facts that are available are mostly reliable. And that brand of just being right at a core level is worth something, even if it's tinted in the reason Christine is so right to point out Dan Rather. What did Dan Rather do? He wanted that story to be true. And he allowed, the New York Times famously referred to the Memogate as the fake but accurate,
right.
the fake but accurate reporting of CBS News. They knew it was true. They felt like it was true. And so they experienced a confirmation bias. And they lost confidence because they got the facts wrong. Opinion is fine, but you got to stick to the facts.
Okay.
All right?
I think there's a lot more to it that goes into story selection.
Totally.
That means that even so, you're not getting a complete picture. Sure, the facts can be accurate, but the shading that you put around them and the stories that you choose to cover means there's enormous bias that can go into it, even around that.
The first bias in journalism is the stories you don't cover, right? Story selection is the first and most essential bias.